Hello and welcome back to a special coverage on US election 2024. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India NewsHour with me, Deepika. First up, let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. United States votes in extraordinary presidential election. Polling also underway in all battleground states. Republican candidate Donald Trump casts his vote at Florida, says he's very confident he will win the election and that it won't even be close. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fires Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Katz appointed as the new Defense Minister. First, let's get you all the latest on the ongoing US presidential polls as the race to the White House nears the finish line. Now, voting for the 2024 US presidential election began with the Eastern time zone in America. New Hampshire was the first state where polling started. Dixville Notch, a small town in the state of New Hampshire, became the first place in the country where voters cast their ballot. Now, voting across the country begins at 6 a.m. local time. Since the US is divided in different time zones, the eastern part of the country sees polling first. At 6 a.m. local time or 4:30 p.m. according to Indian Standard Time, 8 states which fall in the Eastern Time Zone or the ET began polling. These include the states of Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire and Virginia. Tens of millions of voters across the United States have already cast their vote early. These votes were sent in either by mail or by visiting the polling station in person. According to data from the University of Florida's election lab, more than 82 million voters across the United States had already voted before the main election day. So this is the final opportunity for Americans to vote in the tightly contested 2024 presidential race between Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Kamala Harris, hurtled towards an uncertain finish. The candidates were running neck and neck in the campaign's final days in each of the 7 states likely to determine the winner. These are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that showed the opinion polls. Now, the winner may not be known for days if the margins in the key states remain as slim as they are really expected. Now, as Republican nominee Donald Trump cast his vote in West Palm Beach, Florida, DD India's Amritpal Singh reports from Ground Zero.
Trump has just voted. He said that he's confident that he will make it back to the White House as his voter base has turned out in large numbers to vote. But more importantly, Donald Trump said that there will be no violence from his camp. He said these reports about violence are not true. He called them fake and said that he's appealed for no violence, for fair and smooth elections. He said if it were a paper ballot, the results would be out known by now, basically casting aspersions on the voting process, hinting that there could be a voter fraud, but at the same time trying to say that his voter base has turned out across the country in large numbers and he's confident that he'll make it to the White House. With cameraman Sanjay Jaina, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India at West Palm Beach, Florida.
Now, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said he would be prepared to concede defeat after Tuesday's vote if it's a fair election.
I lose an election, if it's a fair election, I'd be the first one to acknowledge it. And I think well, so far I think it's been fair. I think there's been a lot of court cases. Both sides are lawyered up. Thousands of lawyers are involved. Thousands, can you imagine? And part of that is because we have too complicated a process. If we had a piece of paper, watermarked, you know that paper is more sophisticated now than computers. It's watermarked paper. You cannot, it's unbelievable what happens with it. There's nothing you can do to cheat.
And asked about fears of unrest after the election and whether he would call on supporters to avoid violence, he criticized the question and said his supporters are not violent people.
I don't have to tell them that there'll be no violence. Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence.
And further, Donald Trump again raised concerns about the use of electronic voting machines. After casting his vote in Florida, Donald Trump reiterated his previous criticism of electronic voting machines, suggesting they were less secure than paper ballots and would delay the outcome being known.
A thing like that should never happen. This election should be over. They spend all this money on machines. And frankly, if they'd use paper ballots, it would be over by 10 o'clock. And by the way, the paper ballots would cost 8%. It would be 8% of the cost. If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. It's crazy.
Now, the New Hampshire hamlet of Dixville Notch opened its polling at the stroke of midnight on Tuesday, traditionally marking the start of the U.S. election hours before the rest of the country. People in Michigan enthusiastically lined up at polling stations to cast their votes. Michigan is one of 7 key battleground states where U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is running neck and neck with former U.S. President Donald Trump. Voters in North Carolina, Georgia, New York and New Hampshire also cast their ballots on Tuesday.
I'm here first thing in the morning. I think it's very important to, whatever you're doing today, if you haven't voted, get out and vote. It's a right that not everybody in the world gets, so you have to take advantage of it, and it does matter. It will change your life. You never know what kind of legislation is going to happen, so take advantage of your rights.
It is so important that everyone comes out to vote today. It is an election like no other. And if you have any thoughts of not voting, today is the day to change your mind. You can do voting today, even if you're not registered to vote. And it will be an important part of our history as Americans that today you have gone and voted. And it's important whether you vote Democrat or Republican. It is a special thing to be able to vote for your candidate.
Now, voters in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania came out to vote in what polls have shown is a neck-and-neck race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Both the candidates have raced to pitch for support in Pennsylvania, which is expected to play a pivotal role in deciding this week's U.S. presidential election. Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance cast his vote in Cincinnati, Ohio. J.D. Vance joined millions of Americans who were headed to the polls to choose their president.
Look, I feel good. You never know until you know, but I feel good about this race. I felt good about my own race a couple of years ago when I voted in this exact same spot. Hopefully it goes as well for President Trump and me as it went for me a couple of years ago in the state of Ohio.
And now let's hear some more reactions from early voters in Arizona and New York.
I voted for Kamala, and I think it's especially important because just all the ridiculous and outrageous things that Trump are saying, and he's trying to make America a fascist state again. And as people of color and as a woman, I thought it's important that we have to vote this time.
I voted for Trump, and I don't know not about politics, but I think he's good for the economy. But I don't know that much about the election because it's my first time voting. So
I want to vote for the candidate that has values, that backs his values, that backs it with fairness, that makes sure that in America, it doesn't matter if your name is Martin or Mohammed, Patrick or Patel, Singh or Smith, that you get not ahead on the color of your skin, but the content of your character. So the candidate who does that, and I know in my heart who that is.
Abortion is really important to me. I think immigration laws are really important to me. Recessions and economics are really important to me. And I think it impacts not only students, but everybody else.
I think it's in God's hands, and whoever's supposed to win is going to win, and that's where I'm coming from.
I just hope they do it right, you know. I'd rather they do it right than just rush through it.
And now DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh joins us live from Washington, D.C. for more updates. A very good evening to you, Shubhendu, from India. We've been seeing your coverages from there since so many days, and they've been really extensive. First, let's talk about the voter turnout. How is the excitement there among the voters? How is it looking like right now, Shubhendu?
Hello, Deepika. This is about afternoon here in Washington, D.C., about 1:45 p.m. That's the time here. We're nearly halfway through as far as the voting is concerned on the big election day. The voter turnout has been brisk. We are at a school which has been turned into a voting center for the day, and the long queues inside of the building. We're not allowed to shoot there. Certain laws which says that we have to be at a distance from the voting station. But we'd gone inside without the camera to see that there were long spiraling queues inside of the voting booth. Unlike what we saw in early voting, where a few people would come through the day and cast their vote because they would have many days to vote. But today is the final day for American voters to register who they want as their next leader. Also, the voting is going to be a little longer process for individual voters. We have to understand that although the focus is on the presidential elections, there are a number of other seats in offices up for election. There are some seats for Senate, there are some seats for House of Representatives. There are also local body. Washington, D.C., of course, is a city, but in other states, there are also city assemblies for which voting is taking place. There is amendment over the issue of abortion, marijuana in at least 10 states, so the voters also have to vote on that. Then there are local referendums of the local areas. So it's almost like a 6 to 7 page thick booklet that the voters have to fill through. Most of the voting is happening through paper ballot. There is electronic voting also in America, the provision for that. But the voting has been quite brisk. Long queue suggests that this could in fact turn out to be a more encouraging turnout of the voters. 2020 saw nearly 2/3 of the registered voter casting their ballot. We'll have to wait and watch if the momentum continues as it is continuing since morning till afternoon. This could be a great day for American democracy as far as participation of the voters is concerned.
And also, Shubhendu, considering the razor-thin margin between both the lead contestants here, candidates, and considering what happened the last time, how are the security measures put in place right now?
Well, that's hugely important issue, Deepika. There's been apprehension in the air. Tension still prevails. In fact, this is perhaps a more peaceful time when voters are walking in, casting their ballot and going home. It is when the voting is over through most of America. It's a time zone divided country. So East Coast would have completed, where I am, would have completed voting at least 3 hours before the West Coast. It is when the trends start coming in. It is when we begin to know which candidate has an edge. That is when the administration is concerned about the law and order situation. This has been, we've seen through the weeks, a very bitterly fought election, a very polarizing election. There is absolutely no room for a middle ground between these two candidates, between the two parties, between the supporters of the two parties. Everyone sees their candidates winning re-election, and that is the only alternative they appear to want to believe. If I were to quote Donald Trump, he's been saying that either he's going to win or it is going to be an election fraud. So such kind of rhetoric also is inducing a certain degree of nervousness, certain degree of caution in the electoral system. The polling booths have been made very secure. There are use of bulletproof glasses. We can see drone surveillance being done to make sure that no law and order situation happens while the voting is on, and also later when the counting takes place. National security guards have also been put on alert across the nation to tackle any eventuality. Usually we would see such security cover for the principal candidates, in this case Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, but this time security is in a great way extended to the polling authorities as well, because threats are coming in from all directions because the tempers, the passions are so high and divided in these elections.
And considering so many issues which are internal to the US and also external to it, considering the geopolitical situation of what is happening across the globe, for the benefit of our viewers, what is the global importance of the US election, Shubhendu?
That's a hugely important point that you mentioned, Deepika. So far, we have been focusing on the domestic issues, why most people in America are coming out to vote. But America is an economic superpower. It has a great presence and position in global geopolitics. So what happens here could have wide-scale ramification. We could take some examples. There is a great degree of nervousness we are reporting in Kiev, that is the Ukraine capital. The direction in which the Ukraine conflict could proceed would be very, very different if Kamala Harris wins as compared to if Donald Trump wins. They've made their positions very clear about how they look at the conflict. Similarly, with the Gaza conflict, with the unrest in the Middle East, America's own allies, NATO, are also unsure about what kind of future will this alliance have. It will all depend on whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump wins. So we see in economic terms, in security terms, in strategic terms, all these areas, given that these two candidates have very divergent views and they have a different worldview and they sort of articulate America's position in the world very differently, the person who wins is going to definitely lead America in a very different direction from the other. In that sense, all the international stakeholders are observing, watching these elections very carefully.
All right. Thank you so much, Shubhendu, for joining us right now. Please keep a track. We'll come back to you. Thank you so much for joining right now. And now let's go across to our esteemed panel of guests. I'm joined by foreign affairs expert and the editor, Ramesh Ramachandran, who's there with us inside the studio. We're also joined by Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, who's the former senior diplomat. Joining us on the broadcast is Dr. Harinder Sekhon, the distinguished fellow of Cuts International Washington DC Center. A very good evening to all the guests here present on this special broadcast, and thank you so much for taking out your time and joining this special show. Sir, first of all, coming to you, Mr. Ramesh Ramachandran, please help us understand the importance of swing states, which are the 7 in number right now, but they do play a very key role here in the US elections.
Right. Typically, let me break it down for our viewers in simple language for them to be able to understand the intricacies of the issues at hand here. Now, there are 50 US states, and each state is assigned a certain number of electoral college votes based on its population. So, Texas, for instance, has 40 electoral college votes as compared to 54 in California. Now, there are, based on the trends, the way a state votes for Republican or Democrat, one can safely assume that if Trump were to retain his base, his constituency spread across the country, then he's rest assured of a minimum number of votes of 219. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is assured a minimum electoral college votes of 226 if she retains all the states that are traditionally voted Democratic. What's the difference is that there are 7 key states which are swing states, which we don't know whether they will vote Republican or Democrat based on previous voter trends and results. Why is that? Because Michigan, for instance, was won by Trump in 2016, but he lost it in 2020. So it remains to be seen which way these 7 key states vote. And which are the 7 key states, Deepika? North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada. What makes it more interesting, Deepika, is that there are 93 votes up for grabs in all these 7 key states. Pennsylvania accounts for the largest number at 19 electoral college votes, followed by North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and so on and so forth. Now, it's important to remember that either Trump or Harris needs to win at least 270 electoral college votes to be able to become the next US president. And these 7 states determine the outcome of the election, and whoever wins Pennsylvania, Deepika, is sure to become the next US president. That's why we saw both Harris and Trump campaign the last day of the campaign in Pennsylvania. In fact, Harris held her last campaign rally in the state of Pennsylvania, which ended just before midnight before the polling began. Trump, on the other hand, traveled from Pennsylvania to adjoining state of Michigan, where he held his last campaign rally. So all eyes are on Pennsylvania and Michigan. Which way they will vote, we don't know yet, but the trend suggests that these 2 states will hold the key to the outcome of the elections. So we have, very interesting scenario building up, Deepika, as we speak, and it's interesting to watch out the way things pan out going forward.
So that was a comprehensive view of the 7 swing states and how they are going to play an important key role in today's results, especially if we talk about. Now let's go across to Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, the senior diplomat. Sir, when we talk about US elections and the internal issues, they range from economy to healthcare to other issues, which means security also, considering the past shootings that we've seen. First, let's talk about economy, and I'll quote the statements here where Harris has said that her day one priority would be trying to reduce food and housing costs for working families, whereas Trump says he will end inflation and said more drilling for oil will lower energy costs as an example to it. Now, the result tonight would suggest which argument won the hearts, but who, according to you, presented the strongest bid to fight one of the most pressing issues, which is the economy here?
Yeah, that is, of course, one of the most important, significant issues as far as the election is concerned. As I would imagine, it is in any election around the world because, it is these particular aspects which determine which way an individual is going to vote. What is the price of the goods, what is the cost of the goods, how, what is there to run the house, to run the kitchen, etc. So these are very, very important issues. Now, the position of, let's say, Mr. Trump is that when he was the president last time from 2017 to 2021, the economy was in a very good shape. The inflation was low, the interest rates were low, the cost of goods and commodities, particularly as far as the common goods that are used in the day-to-day living for people, that was affordable. And as far as, now, after 4 years, and energy prices were low. Now, after 4 years, the situation has changed. There is inflation, energy prices are going up, and there is increasing joblessness. There is increasing unemployment, and it was the times were much better 4 years ago. So he says that he has his previous track record to show, and then what he's going to do is he is going to impose tariffs on goods that are coming in, because basically his argument is that since the imports from China are taking place in such large numbers, that is why the production and manufacturing within America has come down, and that is why there is joblessness and unemployment. So he says he's going to impose tariffs of about 60% on goods coming from China, which means that there will be much greater possibility of having more manufacturing and more production and more investment and more jobs within the country. But of course, analysts and economists suggest that, if you are going to impose tariffs, those aspects, those items which are imported will tend to get imported, but they will have to pay higher costs, and so that will give rise to inflation. So that is a big aspect as far as Trump's economic plans and policies are concerned. As far as, the other aspect, what he says is that he's going to end the war. End the war in, particularly in Kiev, in Ukraine, and Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so the money that is going out from the United States to support the Ukrainian war effort, that will also, that is the taxpayers' money from the United States, that will not go, and that will help to alleviate the economic conditions and suffering of the people. As far as Kamala Harris is concerned, of course, her position is that she is going to provide benefits, and she is going to provide support to those who are buying their house for the houses for the first time, those individuals for their living, day-to-day living requirements, etc. So she is going to be focusing on the middle-class people, while she says that Trump is going to cut taxes for the rich people and not care so much about the ordinary people. I think the fact that needs to be recognized is that earlier it used to be that Democrats used to be seen as a party of the working class people. Today they are being recognized as a party of the elites, because that is why if you see what are known as the blue states, which are principally democratic, they are either on the west coast or on the east coast, which is the prosperous region. And Donald Trump has honed into a constituency that is the Middle West, that is the Rust Belt, that is the red states in the center, where the working class, the white male non-college educated people who have seen that all this globalization over the last many years, that has not helped them, that has not come to their assistance. In fact, there was a statistics which said that in 1980, the earning of such people was about 7% more than the average of what the people in the United States earn. But today, after China came in and China emerged as the manufacturing capital of the world, so to say, and its trade surplus with the United States increased to $500 billion and around that figure. Then the working class, the blue-collar working class, their average salary is 12% lower than the average American. So they have faced the brunt of this globalization, which has been to their disadvantage. So these are the policies that are being advanced, Deepika, by the two candidates. And it would appear that Kamala Harris does not have a very strong case, because Trump has a track record on which about which he is talking. So he has a more credible case, and that is what people seem to be believing.
Another very important and very strong ground that both the contestants are vouching upon is women and their abortion rights. I would like to come to Dr. Harinder Sikon. Dr. Sikon, Tim Walz said that women voters will have a strong voice in this election, considering the kind of takes both the candidates have presented on abortion and women's health and their right. What is your take on how both the candidates have presented their take on it?
Trump has come across as a very conservative person when it comes to abortion rights. In fact, he has toed the line of the Republican Party. And as we noticed in the first debate, the September debate between Trump and Kamala Harris, she came out very strong on her views on abortion rights for women. She firmly believes that women should have a right, and she actually said repeatedly that they should have a right to take their own decision. They should have a right over their bodies. So that is something which really resounds with women in America. They all want greater freedom, and they want to have this choice given to them. And there is a feeling that some of the Republican women who are traditionally Republican actually do agree with Kamala Harris on her views on abortion rights. And she is hoping that she would be able to swing this vote, even if it is in small numbers. So that would be a very key gain for her if she can get. And she has repeatedly talked, the two planks where she emerged strong is, as I mentioned earlier also, one is that she would safeguard democracy. Trump is the unknown factor, the maverick who would upset the established order within the United States, whereas she has promised stability and also coalition building, not just overseas with American partners across the globe, but also, to heal the country from within. So she is seen as more, not just as a status quoist, but she has distanced herself from some of the policies of the Biden administration and has come out with her own policy prescriptions for some of the ills that which are there within the United States. And she definitely has come across as somebody who speaks for the middle class, whether it is their economic rights, the right to affordable housing, or the women with their abortion. And in fact, she has been debating this entire issue of Roe versus Wade issue, and she has gone through the legalities and the nitty-gritties of this issue and how she would, introduce, what stages she would introduce the reforms when it comes to women, how she would also, not just abortion, reform the entire healthcare system which has not really delivered because a lot of the Obamacare was done away with during Trump's time. So how she would restore affordable health care for the people. So that is where she's come out very strongly. And let's see, like if it really results in any votes for her, because at the end of the day, it's a very close race. And it depends on how many people, how many women voters will come and vote. Right now, the numbers, halfway through the day, it seems that a large number of women voters have come. And the other section which she's been able to energize is the youth. The college young people in colleges who are voting for the first time. She has tried to reach out to them. And I think those are her strong points, reaching out to the marginal, to the, not just the white man, because Trump appeals to the white macho man, whereas Kamala Harris has identified very closely with the black community, with the Indian Americans, and the youth and women. So I think that is where she has an advantage, definitely.
Talking about the current trend, Wilmington is witnessing a large number of voters, which are largely women and their daughters, when we talk about women's rights and the healthcare system. We will talk about immigration also, which is another topic. But coming on to you, Ramesh, because we've seen the contrasting takes here. One on the economy and how Donald Trump is dealing with it. And the second one is on women and how Kamala Harris is taking it forward. And she has pressed on it till the last moment through her radio addresses also. Now, Ramesh, talk us a bit about the personality and politics of both the people, because we still remember what happened on the 6th of January and that still haunts the people somewhere.
Indeed, Deepika. To put it mildly, it's a study in contrast, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Why do I say that? Let me give you the nuts and bolts of their personalities and politics, as you put it. Kamala Harris is a lawyer by training and profession. Trump, on the other hand, is a business person. Harris is relatively young. She's at 60 years old as compared to 78 of Donald Trump. Kamala Harris comes from a mixed ancestry. She has, her father was black, her mother was an Indian, whereas Donald Trump is born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as it were. But that said, if you look at the politics of these two personalities, Deepika, Kamala Harris could well become the first woman to become the US president if she succeeds in the polling that's taking place in the US as we speak. She's the first black woman candidate to run for president and could well end up becoming the first black woman president as well, and also the first Indian American to run for office of the President of the United States of America. In contrast, here we have a man called Donald Trump, who is first president to be convicted for a felony, first former president to be convicted at the same time, and impeached twice, not once but twice. And he's the second US president to seek a non-consecutive election. He won in 2016, lost in 2020, now standing for election again in 2024. By the way, he's the oldest presidential candidate in US history at 78 years old, and he survived 2 assassination attempts at that. So it's interesting to see how these two personalities fare at the hustings, so to speak. Talking about issues, women in particular, Deepika, as we discussed before, abortion, reproductive rights is the key issue for the Democrats in particular. Kamala Harris is pro-choice as compared to Donald Trump, who is pro-life. She is also bullish on democracy, as Dr. Harinder Sekhon was referring to. On the other hand, Trump is categorically speaking about two key issues in his campaign. One, immigration, and two, the economy or jobs. He says that immigrants entering the US illegally have to be booted out, so to speak, and he has promised that on day one after he wins, he will enact or implement the largest deportation in US history ever to take place, to flush out the so-called illegals from the US and send them back to where they came from. In the context of the wall that he has spoken about in his last term in 2016, when he spoke about the Mexican, the wall that separates US from Mexico. On the other hand, he's also spoken about how he wants to reduce taxes on the Americans and impose tariffs if required on the Chinese, for instance, to essentially protect American or US manufacturing. So in a way, As I mentioned, this study in contrast, and that's why we saw both Trump and Harris campaign in Pennsylvania on the last day of campaign just several hours ago. Harris is promising a quote-unquote fresh start as compared to Trump, who is talking about regaining lost glory or achieving newer heights for the U.S. Talking about the riots of 2021, Deepika, it's interesting because we are given to understand that reports suggest that National Guards are on standby to be deployed if necessary as the polling progresses and counting draws near. Will Trump accept the verdict? He says he will if. He qualifies it by saying if the voting or polling was fair. We don't know how he categorizes it. We'll have to wait and watch. At the same time, his lawyers are planning to battle it out in the courts, so to speak, to press upon the advantage that the Republicans have in some key states. So all in all, it's a mixed bag for the Republicans and the Democrats. It remains to be seen how this eventually pans out in the next several hours going forward.
Indeed, that is what everybody is eyeing upon, because this is a very stark contrast when we talk about what happened on the 6th of January and the statement what Trump has said that he will concede the result if they are fair. But as you said, what happens remains to be seen. Now let's talk about another very important issue where again a very stark contrast has been seen by both the candidates is immigration. Coming on to you, Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, Harris, if wins, is likely to carry forward the plan set up by Biden administration, whereas Trump has vowed to seal the border when we talk about immigration. In both the cases, what are the loopholes that you see?
Yeah, as far as immigration is concerned, again, that's really become a red hot button issue, between as far as this election is concerned. And, Trump, when he came in 2016, he had said that he would construct a wall on the Mexican border and basically to stop the illegal immigration coming in from Mexico and from the other South American countries into America. That could not be done, and, but he was able to keep in check because of several of the initiatives that he had taken during his presidency. He was able to keep in check the illegal immigration during his tenure. But what we have seen over the last 3.5 years that President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in office, that the number of illegal migrants that have come into the United States has jumped very hugely, and that is considered to be a very, in addition to the economy, as I said, which is seen, although at the macro level, the American economy seems to be doing quite well. But as far as the living conditions of the people are concerned, they have deteriorated. So while economy is seen as one of the, if one could call it the failures or one of the weaker points as far as Kamala Harris is concerned, so also is immigration, because she was put in charge of controlling immigration from the southern border, and she has not been successful. Her plan of action is that we should have a bipartisan bill. There was a bipartisan bill, and that if it had gone through, it would have sort of funded more officials on the southern border so that the immigration of illegal people who are trying to stream in, that could have been controlled. But Donald Trump specifically instructed the Republican lawmakers that they should not support it because that would give a victory to Joe Biden, which he didn't want to give. And he said that immigration was an important issue that he wanted to use in the election. So what Kamala Harris is saying is that if she were to become president, she is going to reactivate that bipartisan bill so that there will be much greater provision for stopping illegal immigration into the United States. And as Ramesh has just said, and very correctly, what Donald Trump is claiming is that on the first day he is going to deport millions of illegal migrants to the countries from where they came. But I think this is more easily said than it is implemented. So I think it is only for electoral purposes that it is being said. It will be not be possible to do that in that sense. But if either of them were to become president, I think definitely Kamala Harris is going to be more liberal as far as legal immigrants are concerned, and Donald Trump, because he wants to preserve jobs for the American people, so he will be more stringent and more strict on the entry even of legal immigrants, which are required by the U.S. Economy and U.S. System, because if you want to get fresh talent from outside, then you need such legal migration coming into the country. But these are the two very varied and very diverse views on this very important subject. But here also, I would say that, Donald Trump has a better argument that he has been able to present to the people of America.
Now, moving beyond the concerns of the United States, US election has a lot to do with the current geopolitical conditions as well. Coming on to you, Dr. Sekhar. Now, Kamala Harris has vowed to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, whereas Donald Trump wants the US to disentangle itself from conflicts elsewhere in the world. But we do see a growing support for Trump from Russia and elsewhere. Do you think that Harris may lose her vote here, considering the sort of statements she has made on foreign policy specifically?
She definitely came across as somebody who did not have a well-articulated view on foreign policy. But then Trump was equally controversial because he did not say, he said he would end the war in Ukraine very soon. And that is something which he kept repeating both at his debate and even in the subsequent statements he has made. But he does not say how he is going to end the war in Ukraine. He was asked a very pointed question that would he cut off all aid to Ukraine or would he let NATO take care of the war in Ukraine? And he had no answer to that. But he says, I will speak with my friend Putin and we will put... But these things are not simple. Campaigning is something and being a candidate is something very different from when you become president. And so far we have seen that there is there is a continuity in US foreign policy. And even earlier he said that, the last time he won the election, he thought he would take a lot of, he would make NATO take greater responsibility, which to a certain extent, I think the US administrations did tell NATO to adopt at least 2%, of their budget to give for their own security, European security. But when it comes to foreign wars, it depends because Trump could also make certain loose statements which may not go very well. And his earlier stint has shown, his earlier administration, that he could not really mend bridges with Russia because maybe he was on the back foot because of a so-called tape and he seemed to be under some kind of scrutiny on his links with Russia. So the policy was a continuity. He focused more on the Indo-Pacific, which Biden has strengthened. So I don't see either of them really deviating. Trump's, the US policy as such has been that they will not withdraw from the Middle East. Both parties support Israel and the war effort. I think Kamala Harris, in the last few months, she's had very short time as a candidate, but she has traveled extensively both to East Asia and also she's gone to the Middle East. So I think she's more energetic, definitely, and understands the issues. And I think, as Ambassador Sajjan Har was saying, she is going to be the softer voice of American foreign policy if she comes, whereas Trump could get a little rhetorical. It's good to make these high-sounding statements because you are a candidate. But when it comes to policy, the US electorate, of course, would want the US to withdraw from the wars and let Europe handle the affairs. But then the repercussions of such a move is something which both would have to, either of them, whoever becomes the president, would really have to think out the repercussions of a US withdrawal from Europe. I mean, you cannot let your NATO partners down. You cannot leave Ukraine because that strengthens Russia and China. So the geopolitics is a very complicated affair. It has drawn a little more attention, the geopolitical and world affairs, in this election than has been the case in the past.
All right.
But I don't think either of the candidates or whoever becomes president, policy is not going to be something fundamental to US interests.
All right. So whether rhetorics find its space or the soft voice prevails remains to be seen. Thank you so much, Mr. Ramesh Ramachandran, for joining us, Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar and Dr. Sukhov for joining us on the special broadcast. We'll keep coming back to you. Thank you so much for joining us right now. Moving on, now let's talk about Donald Trump. Who exactly is Donald Trump? Well, Donald J. Trump was born on the 14th of June in the year 1946, New York. And following his father's footsteps, Trump began career as a real estate, and now you can see him running in the presidential race. And before that, he served as the 45th president of the United States on the 20th of January 2017. We'll get to more on that, but before that, let's take a look at other stories also in the special broadcast. So as the US undergoes one of its most consequential presidential election, former President Barack Obama made an appeal on social media to vote for Democratic nominee Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz. Take a listen.
Going to be close. In some states, just a handful of votes in every precinct could decide the winner. So you need to get out there and vote. So tell your family, talk to your neighbors, make a plan, go to the polls with your friends and vote. Vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Head to iwillvote.com to look up your polling place today. Folks, this election is going to be close. In some states, just a handful of votes.
So the US presidential race isn't just about promises made to the voters, but it's about reputation, experience, and the track record that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris bring to the table. With moments that have shaped their careers and challenges that could define their futures, now let's take a look at the highs and lows of the candidates competing for the Oval Office.
In this high-stakes battle for the White House, the two presidential nominees, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, have a lot on stake. Both have seen towering successes and faced sharp criticism in their careers. And now, those defining moments are under the microscope as the election approaches. For Donald Trump, his highs are largely tied to his role in reshaping the US economy during his presidency. His America First agenda led to tax cuts, deregulation, and what his supporters saw as a booming pre-pandemic economy. He has consistently stood for job growth, energy independence, and a tough stance on trade, especially with China. But his lows are equally significant. His handling of the COVID-19 pandemic drew widespread criticism, and his policies on immigration and foreign relations left the US divided, both domestically and internationally. Trump's legal challenges and controversies since leaving office have also cast a long shadow over his 2024 campaign. On the other hand, Kamala Harris has made history as the first woman and the first woman of color to serve as US Vice President. Her highs include her advocacy for healthcare reform, voting rights, and environmental action. She is seen as a champion of progressive policies, and her rise to the second highest office in the US has inspired many. Yet Harris faces her own lows. Critics argue that her tenure as vice president has been marked by challenges, with less visibility on key issues like immigration and handling of the US-Mexico border issue. And largely, questions remain about her ability to unite the broad Democratic base. While Trump leans on his experience as a businessman and former president, Harris positions herself as a progressive leader for a more inclusive America. Bureau Report, TT India.
All right, moving on now. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday dismissed Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over a breakdown in trust during the Gaza war against Hamas. The statement issued by Netanyahu's office said over the past few months that trust has eroded, while Israel Katz has been appointed as Israel's new defense minister. In response, Gallant said that working to ensure the country's security would remain the mission of his life after Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed him. India has issued a strong condemnation over the recent violence at the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton, Ontario. The incident has triggered outrage both in Canada and India, with the leaders and citizens demanding accountability. Here's more.
India has strongly condemned the recent violence at the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton, Ontario, carried out by extremists and separatists. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, described vandalism of the temple as deeply concerning and called for a swift response.
I think what happened at the Hindu temple in Canada was obviously deeply concerning. You would have seen the statement first by our official spokesperson and also the expression of concern by our Prime Minister yesterday. That should, I think, convey to you how deeply we feel about it.
Earlier on Monday, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke out, condemning the deliberate attack and emphasizing the need to protect places of worship and respect religious sentiments. Taking to social media platform X, PM Modi said, "I strongly condemn the deliberate attack on a Hindu temple in Canada. Equally appalling are the cowardly attempts to intimidate our diplomats. Such acts of violence will never weaken India's resolve. We expect the Canadian government to ensure justice and uphold the rule of law." The incident has sparked widespread protests among the Indian community in Brampton. Demonstrators, deeply hurt by the incident, raised Indian and Canadian national flags and called on officials to take serious action against the perpetrators. There was also anger towards the regional Peel police after a police officer was reportedly suspended for participating in the attack. Protesters expressed frustration, urging politicians to acknowledge Hindu sentiments and ensure stronger protections for the community.
We are deeply hurt as Hindu community what has happened here yesterday, and we have come here in support of Hindu community. Hindu community has contributed so much to Canada, and we are progressive. We add so much economical value. We follow law and order.
As tensions rise, the Indian government has requested that Canadian authorities take decisive action to prevent future incidents and ensure that those responsible for the violence are arrested and prosecuted. Bureau Report, DD India.
And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Deepika, and from all of us here in New Delhi, thank you so much for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.